Beyond the Gate spoilers tease that Andre Richardson and Ashley Morgan may have started a relationship. Andre might be ready to leave Dani Dupree to be with Ashley officially. In a town where everyone thinks they know each other, the truth often festers behind closed doors. Dani Dupree sat alone in her dim kitchen, the same spot where she used to sip morning coffee with Bill Hamilton before everything fell apart. The betrayal she suffered at Bill's hands had almost broken her, but she rebuilt, piece by piece, forming a new version of herself with Andre. Or so she believed. The bar downtown, Murphy's Tap, had long been a pressure valve for the town, a place where secrets loosened with every drink. That night, Dani walked in expecting a quiet drink. Instead, she saw Andre with Ashley. They weren't just talking. There was intimacy in their body language. The way Ashley leaned into him. The way Andre brushed her hair back like Dani had once let him do. She stood frozen, watching the scene as her heart cracked open. Dani didn't make a scene. She walked away. She returned home and poured herself a drink, then another. Flashbacks of Bill's betrayal flooded in the nights he didn't come home, the whispers she overheard, the cold distance that grew until he finally confessed. He was in love with someone else. Hayley Lawson. The town's darling, all blonde perfection and ambition. When Bill married Hayley, Dani thought the final nail had been driven into their story. But the reality was different. Bill never truly let go of Dani. He kept in contact under the pretense of closure, but Dani could sense it still felt something. Maybe guilt. Maybe love. Hayley had no idea. Or maybe she chose not to see it. Her world was carefully curated: the successful husband, the polished reputation, the controlled life. Bill played the part, but something always seemed off. Especially after his accident. Hospitalized for weeks, barely conscious. When he woke, it wasn't Hayley he asked for. It was Dani. Now Dani found herself spiraling. Andre had been her anchor. When he started seeing Ashley, everything unraveled again. She tried to confront him, but Andre deflected, made excuses. Work. Stress. She saw the lies in his eyes. Ashley Morgan had always been ambitious. She knew how to work a room, and Andre was no exception. Their chemistry wasn't sudden. It had been building, subtle and insidious. Late meetings. Shared glances. Quiet conversations that lasted too long. Dani had sensed something for weeks, but ignored it, afraid to believe her intuition might be right twice in a lifetime. That night, after the bar, Dani found herself walking aimlessly through the streets, bottle in hand. Her phone slipped from her purse and hit the pavement. She picked it up and dialed the number she swore she'd deleted months ago. Bill answered on the second ring. He sounded tired, his voice still hoarse from the hospital stay. "Dani? I need someone," she said. Within 30 minutes, he was at her doorstep. He looked worn, with a limp that hadn't healed and eyes that had seen too much. But he came anyway. They sat in silence for a while, just drinking. Then the words spilled out. About Andre. Ashley. The bar. Dani's voice trembled between anger and despair. Bill listened, really listened. And when Dani broke down crying, he put his arm around her. She didn't resist. The night carried them to a place they both thought they'd buried. Dani leaned in. Bill didn't stop her. One kiss became two, and then they were tangled in the sheets of a motel off the highway. Morning light had barely started to peek through the curtains when Hayley realized Bill hadn't come home. She checked his location. Saw the pin. She drove. Hayley arrived at the motel with a sick feeling in her chest. She walked up to room 204 and knocked. No answer. She tried the knob. It was unlocked. What she saw inside shattered her. Bill asleep. Shirtless. Dani beside him. Hayley stood there in silence, staring at the ruins of everything she thought was solid. She turned, walked back to her car, and didn't cry until the engine started. 2 days later, Bill received divorce papers. But the fallout was only beginning. Everyone in town had an opinion. Whispers filled grocery aisles. Dani was labeled a homewrecker again. Bill was a man who never learned. Hayley, though devastated, kept her composure publicly. Privately, she fell apart. And Andre? He didn't chase Dani. He stayed with Ashley, though something between them began to fracture once the truth of his betrayal came into the open. Dani was alone again. But this time, she wasn't broken. Just empty. She stood outside the motel one morning and watched it in silence, trying to understand why she kept ending up here. She had no answers. Only questions. But somewhere inside, the flicker of resolve had begun to stir. Andre Richardson and Ashley Morgan didn't last long after the town found out. The spark they mistook for connection faded quickly under scrutiny. People whispered. Ashley tried to hold her head high, but even she knew Andre wasn't as committed as he had made her believe. Once Dani was out of the picture, Andre seemed less interested. It turned out, the thrill had been in the secrecy. Ashley began noticing the late replies, the growing distance, the way Andre avoided her eyes. She tried to confront him one evening outside the clinic where they'd first met, but he brushed her off. "Things are complicated," he said. "Maybe we rushed this." Ashley left that night with her pride in pieces. She'd thought she was winning. Now she realized she had been nothing more than a convenient escape. Meanwhile, Dani Dupree had vanished from public view. She left town for a while, staying at a lakeside cabin owned by her cousin in a quiet, wooded stretch upstate. No one knew where she'd gone. She left no forwarding address. The motel scandal had broken something inside her again, and this time, she didn't want to patch it up. She needed distance. Silence. Time. Bill Hamilton, divorced once again, found himself staring at his reflection and seeing a man he no longer recognized. He had hurt the only two women who ever loved him, and for what? A fantasy? A temporary escape from the weight of his own guilt? He stopped drinking. He stopped everything. For weeks, he barely left the house. Hayley Lawson Hamilton, despite the pain, didn't spiral. She channeled it. Filed the divorce papers, divided the assets, and returned to her maiden name. In public, she wore it like armor. In private, she burned photos and cried into pillows no one saw. But she also hired a private investigator. Not on Bill. On Dani. She needed to understand what it was about Dani that made men fall and crawl back. The investigator didn't find much, just records of the cabin rental and sightings of Dani at a nearby market. But one photo struck Hayley, Dani sitting alone on a dock, barefoot, staring out at the lake. There was no victory in it. No smug satisfaction. Just sadness. Hayley stopped the investigation after that. Back in town, Andre tried to salvage his reputation. He leaned into work, took on a new real estate project, and tried pretending nothing had happened. But people remembered. Deals fell through. Clients ghosted him. He blamed Ashley at first, then Dani. Eventually, he stopped blaming and started realizing the problem was him. Ashley left town not long after. She packed up her things in the middle of the night and drove away without telling anyone. Some said she went west. Others thought she returned to family in Chicago. In truth, she didn't tell a soul. She just needed out. Weeks passed. Seasons changed. And Dani returned. Her arrival was quiet. No grand statement. No dramatic confrontation. She just showed up at her old house, retrieved a few things she'd left behind, and began renting a small apartment above the flower shop on Main Street. The town noticed. Some welcomed her. Others kept their distance. Dani didn't care. She wasn't back for redemption. She was back because she had nothing else to run from. Bill showed up one afternoon. He stood on the sidewalk outside her building, holding a coffee. He didn't ask for anything. Just said, "I'm sorry." Dani didn't respond. She took the coffee and shut the door. But later that night, she thought about him. Not because she missed him, but because for the first time in a long while, she realized she didn't need him. Hayley, now fully immersed in a new career venture launching a boutique law firm, crossed paths with Dani weeks later at a charity gala. The tension was thick, but neither woman looked away. They didn't speak. But something passed between them. An acknowledgement of pain, betrayal, and survival. Back in her office, Hayley stared at the divorce decree and thought about calling Bill. Not to rekindle anything, just to close the book properly. But she didn't. Some doors were better left unopened. Bill, now volunteering at the local shelter, found solace in routine. He didn't pursue Dani. He didn't chase Hayley. He just tried to be better. For once, he let go of trying to fix the past. Dani, sitting by her apartment window one evening, opened her journal and began writing again. Not about heartbreak. Not about men. About herself. About what it meant to come undone and rebuild. About how every ending had taught her a new beginning wasn't a gift, it was a choice. By the time winter came, the town had stopped whispering. Because they all knew now love doesn't always return. But peace, if you're patient, sometimes does. As spring rolled in with quiet blossoms and warmer winds, a new chapter emerged for each of them, not one of romance or grand redemption, but of quiet rebuilding. Andre, now out of the spotlight and no longer the name that made deals happen overnight, started volunteering at the same shelter where Bill worked. It began awkwardly. Neither man spoke much. But they sorted donations together. Drove supply runs. Cleaned bathrooms. Slowly, without realizing, they began to talk. Not about Dani. Not about Ashley. Just life. Regret. Trying to make up for wasted years. Ashley, from afar, started a blog under a pseudonym. She wrote about starting over, about ambition, and the price of manipulation, her own included. Her words traveled more than she ever could, quietly helping people she'd never meet. Hayley, though outwardly put together, found herself unraveling in therapy. The firm she built thrived, but she had nightmares. Of motel rooms. Of betrayals. Her therapist suggested forgiveness not for Bill or Dani, but for herself. That took the longest. She began teaching part-time at a local college. Pre-law. Her lectures were sharp, but her office hours became something else. Students lined up for her advice, not just about cases, but about life. She found meaning in guiding them in ways she wished someone had guided her. Dani, now writing a memoir, began reading her work publicly on Friday nights at a bookstore downtown. The room was rarely full, but she read anyway. Her stories weren't perfect. They were raw, honest. And people leaned in. One night, Bill came in, sat in the back, and listened. When she looked up and saw him, she didn't flinch. She kept reading. Afterward, he approached. "You're good," he said. "Too late for compliments," she replied, but her smile was faintly forgiving. They walked a bit after that. Down Main Street. Through the park. They didn't talk about what happened. They talked about the bookstore. The new soup place. His dog. Her next chapter. It didn't lead to anything more. And that was the beauty of it. Not every story ends with a kiss. Some end with understanding. Months later, the town held a community festival. Dani ran the poetry booth. Hayley gave a talk on women in law. Bill and Andre set up the charity tent. Ashley's blog posted an article about forgiveness that went viral. For the first time in a long while, everyone was in the same place. The past didn't disappear. But it softened. And maybe that was the real ending. Not one wrapped in ribbons. But in truth. A place where mistakes had been made, pain had been felt, and somehow, healing had happened anyway. Because sometimes, the real story isn't who ends up with whom. It's who survives and becomes something more because of it.